Breaking news out of college football, where Penn State has fired head coach James Franklin. That is the latest from our Matt Zenitz. The Nittany Lions are off to a 3-3 start to the season after coming into the year as the second-ranked team in the country. Franklin was in the midst of his 12th season in Happy Valley, which included a trip to the college football playoff semis just last year. He is now owed over $49 million as part of his buyout with Penn State. The Nittany Lions are back in action Saturday at Iowa and will play their first game without Franklin since 2013. Assistant head coach and cornerbacks coach Terry Smith will serve as Penn State's interim head coach. Let's bring on Bryant McFadden here to react to this breaking news. And BMAC, we spoke with James Franklin week 1 on the college football pregame show, and he gushed about how great the personnel was around him, not just the coaches, but also the players. And now he is out at Penn State. Where did it all go wrong?
Well, when you have 2 unexpected losses in games where you were 20-point-plus favorites, that's unacceptable. And you talked about the expectations that were for Penn State when you talk about the experience coming back, the notable additions, the coaching staff, the whole nine. We all felt like this was the year for Penn State to go above and beyond any achievement they've been a part of while James Franklin has been there, and it's been a total letdown. You know, when you lost to Oregon in the fashion in which you lost, that was a disappointing loss, but you still had all of your goals in front of you that you would like to achieve. And then the very next week, you lose UCLA when you're a 20-point favorite. And then this past Saturday, you lose at home to Northwestern. Enough is enough. Enough is enough, and I think when you look at the masses, the powers that be that's a part of the program there in Penn State, if you can't get it done this year and seeing what happened in terms of the losses, you got to make a change. And they decided to make a change today, and it's a big surprise. But then when you look at what happened the last few weeks, you shouldn't be that surprised.
Yeah, certainly you lose 3 straight games, and there have been calls for his job. But with it now official, you have no James Franklin, so no head coach. You also have no starting quarterback. Drew Aller was knocked out for the season in yesterday's loss. So if you're a player on this team, what's going through your mind right now with still a lot of season left?
It is. And that was, I guess, for me personally, Emily, that was the most surprising part with them firing James Franklin. Yes, 2 devastating losses, but you still have a lot of games left. You have a lot to play for. You know, you have an opportunity to finish clearly with a good record, potentially try to get into a bowl scenario. And who knows what happens when it comes to the playoff seeding as well. You know, there are a lot of teams that could eliminate each other. But now when you look at losing your head coach, losing your star quarterback, it's important to keep the locker room together, keep the core pieces together. There's still a lot at stake for Penn State. In terms of championship aspirations, that's no longer there. But finishing on a good note, and if you're a player or part of this team, you want to showcase to the current coaching staff and whoever the new coaches might be in the future, I can be a quality asset to what we're trying to do on and off the football field. And most importantly, I believe I have what it takes to get us in contention to compete for a conference title and most importantly for a national championship.
Yeah, there are a lot of older players on this roster, a lot of draft-eligible players. So when we look to the future as it pertains to Penn State, we've been throwing out some names. Matt Rule is one that John Talty told us to circle immediately. But where do you think Penn State should go from here?
You know, having the discussions here up in Stanford with Emory Hunt, our colleague here at CBS, he threw out a good name that I think makes sense. Greg Schiano. You look at his ties in the Big Ten. You look at his ties up in that PA state, up in the northern New Jersey area. Greg Schiano could be a name to kind of watch in terms of what he's done as a head coach, his resume, understanding the recruiting trails, and also understanding the Big Ten. When you're Penn State, you will have quality options, in my opinion. You just got to do your due diligence to make sure whoever you bring in to replace James Franklin is an improvement. Your option B has to be better than your current option A, who was James Franklin, and they have enough time to kind of sort all of these things out to make sure they get the best guy in place.
And there's certainly time to make the hire. Potentially their next head coach could be coaching in the college football playoff, though, which would cause some interesting things down the stretch. Bryant McFadden, thank you so much for that great perspective. We are continuing to react to the news that James Franklin is out at Penn State. He was let go after coaching for 12 seasons with the Nittany Lions, coming off of 3 straight losses. And as we continue to react to this, we want to turn our attention to somebody who is there on the ground. From our 24/7 sports site, Lions 24/7, we have Tyler Donohue here joining us. And Tyler, from a beat reporter standpoint, I think the word that you used was the whiplash that you guys have gone through from being the #1 team preseason, or the #2 team preseason ranked, looking at national title aspirations, everything out ahead, to all of a sudden covering a coaching firing and then a future coaching search. So what all happened to start this football season? We're in mid-October.
Yeah, hello, Emily. Certainly not the conversation I thought we'd be having here the second Sunday of October. I look back 2 months ago, James Franklin's on the record talking about how this is the best personnel he has put together through 12 years at Penn State. He talked about that meaning the roster, talked about that meaning the staff. Truly felt like this was go for launch in terms of chasing the first national championship in 39 years here for the Penn State football program. Instead, we get to the point now where in mid-October, James Franklin's not even on the top of the pyramid here. He's not in the building anymore. And a major reset for Penn State football is incoming. Obviously, they're going to have Terry Smith as the interim coach. He's been an assistant for James Franklin for 12 years. A lot of Franklin's guys are going to be still in the building moving forward. But this is the beginning of a major change for what Penn State's going to look like. You know, just 15 days ago, this Penn State squad's in a top 10 matchup against Oregon. It was the best whiteout environment I've encountered in 9 years covering this program. They have a lead in overtime, and the crowd sensed it. It was like, oh my gosh, is there a breakthrough moment here? Is he finally going to get that win against a top-ranked opponent? They didn't win that game. They got embarrassed at UCLA in stunning fashion. They brought no life to the game last night against Northwestern, lost that one. And like the Oregon game, there was a lot of anger directed for James Franklin, and it felt like a wake in his press conference yesterday. It was a very short opening statement. He was asked a couple times, is it still good for him to be the head coach of Penn State for him? Is it still what he wants in his life? Kind of worked his way around that question without actually answering it. And now, you know, come Sunday afternoon, he is no longer the guy in charge at the Penn State Lash building. Whiplash was the way I put it. That's the way it feels, because we're just so recently in a spot where James Franklin was running the show, looking like it was going to be another deep playoff run. And the expectations were like, if they don't get a bye week in the playoffs, it's going to be a little short of expectations for the regular season. Now, honestly, they might not qualify for a bowl game the way things are going and the way the schedule lays out. So very stark contrast. I think you could probably qualify this as one of the all-time clunkers in terms of expectations versus reality for a college football campaign in modern college football history.
Yeah, it is absolutely wild the way you put that into perspective. 15 days ago, they were playing in that Oregon game, and so much has changed since then. According to reported figures, this is the second biggest buyout ever. So clearly, they really wanted to make this move. So Tyler, whoever comes next, what kind of pressure does this now put on the next guy?
Yeah, I mean, if Pat Kraft is willing to make the decision and the university signs off on it to make this kind of a move and that kind of an investment in moving away from James Franklin, you've got to get this hire right. And it's going to be a costly hire. They're not going to go to the bargain basement and find someone to fill these shoes. I think they're going to take some big swings. And ultimately, it's going to be Pat Kraft that is going to have to take ownership of whatever comes next for this team. You know, while James Franklin couldn't get over the hump in those big games, and clearly this year you were seeing an avalanche kind of build up with negativity and these losses, he's a guy who, for 12 years here, for 11 and a half years here, really built a culture that I think was worth applauding in a lot of ways and a lot of structure. And he put Penn State in a place where, you know, people didn't really anticipate they'd be coming off the scandal 13, 14 years ago. And so now the next hire needs to be someone whose mission is very clear. It's not to go 10-2. It's not to get to New Year's Six bowls. It's not to get to the first or second round of the playoffs. It's to go win the first national championship since 1986. And that means they're going to have to restock the roster. They're They're going to have to make the right coordinator hires themselves. And James Franklin seemingly kind of struck out on his last couple high-profile offensive coordinator hires, and that set them back. And ultimately, it's going to be a trickle down from Pat Kraft, the athletic director, to the head coach, and the way he decides to fill out this next regime. We'll see what kind of carryover that has, whether some of these staff members are retained from the team, and how much of this roster decides to stick it out and buy into a new team. But whether you talk about NIL investments or staff investments, you're going to have a head coach who probably isn't going to show up and just be like, great, pay me. He's going to show up and be wanting to find out how much he can pay his staff, how much he can go play players, and he's going to want a lot of that opportunity. I think if you want to take a big swing in today's college football market, you've got to be able to present that wide scale investment financially that goes beyond just what the head coach is seeing in his bank account. It's going to be what his top assistants see in their bank account, and ultimately what you can do when it comes to the transfer portal, bringing in high school talent. So I think there's a lot to look at here. But I think to make this move now and knowing what they had to kind of swallow in the process, I think they're going to be very proactive, and I think they mean business about chasing the national championship here.
You certainly hope you don't make this decision without having some sort of idea of where you go next. So, Tyler, if you were Pat Kraft, who I don't want to be him right now, but where would you go with this?
Well, I think, one of the hotter names right now, it's hard to ignore what Kurt Cignetti has accomplished at Indiana. And not just at Indiana 1 year, but now it's a 2-year sample size, go on the road yesterday and beat Oregon. And, of course, before that, a lot of success at a lower level of college football. Matt Rule is having a successful season at Nebraska, his best season so far. He's a former walk-on linebacker here at Penn State. I think he has a lot of fond memories about those roots. And, Pat Kraft and him have a history going back to their time at Temple. And Manny Diaz is a guy that comes to mind for me as well. Remember, Pat Kraft briefly hired him at Temple before Miami came calling, and then he went down and took the Miami job. But Manny Diaz is pretty beloved here for what he accomplished as a defensive coordinator. He is very much a face of the franchise type guy, a guy that can impress moms when it comes to the recruiting trail, can impress donors. And so he's someone I think you got to keep an eye on. And I think you work your way through this list. If you want to talk about the biggest potential swing of all, Urban Meyer's out there. He's doing TV. Is that a fit? He comes with some baggage. There's no doubt about that. Some of the stuff in his history, but he also comes with 3 national championship rings at a couple different schools. And he knows how to assemble a staff. He knows how to build a national championship contending roster. If you can get a sense that he is ready to go all in on another job, and you can kind of bring and you can make that very clear to him of what your expectations are for a 4 or 5 year process, maybe that's a swing worth taking as well. I think there's a lot of names to look at. I'm very intrigued by Kenny Dillingham and what he's done at Arizona State. Hasn't been the prettiest year for him, but I think ultimately he brings a lot of the enthusiasm, energy, kind of the program structure that maybe you're interested in if you're doing a reset here. He's been to the college football playoff, and we'll have some stuff over at Lions247.com with our hot board, but a lot of names to look at. But again, I think this needs to be at least the first few names on it, significant swings for Pat Kraft.
Yeah, you phrased it perfectly. You got to take a big swing. Not only has the standard been set, you want to win a national championship, but in order to do that, you have to go through powers that are emerging like an Oregon and Ohio State and Michigan and everything else that you experience in the Big Ten and modern college football. Tyler Donohue, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. You heard him mention you can check out Lions 24/7 for all things Penn State. Check out their, I'm sure it's going to be constantly changing, hot board and just the latest on everything that is happening. So be sure to check in with 24/7 Sports.